Washington is a federal district. It's not a state, let alone a Republican-led state. So for that reason, this is likely to be a much more complicated proposal, we should say, for Trump than perhaps if he had championed it in another state. It is, however, in keeping with a long-running desire of the president to see the death penalty maintained in states that already have it, and in some cases to extend it.
Now let's look at what's going on in the United States the way we are want to do, and I'm really happy to say we're joined now live on the line by our colleague Lara Spirit, formerly of this parish or hereabouts, now Washington correspondent for the Times. Hi to you, Lara.
Hi, how are you?
It's good to have you here, Lara. And we got a bit of just a little bit of news to kick us off. There's always a bit of news to kick us off when we're talking about Washington. Donald Trump, he's been speaking at length today. He frequently speaks and always at length, but he was talking about at one of his televised cabinet meetings, and there was a new policy.
Anybody murders something in the Capitol, capital punishment, capital punishment. If somebody kills somebody in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., we're going to be seeking the death penalty. And that's a very strong preventative. And everybody that's heard it agrees with it. I don't know if we're ready for it in this country, but we have it. It is. We have no choice. So in D.C. and Washington, states are going to have to make their own decision. But if somebody kills somebody, like you could have been killed, very lucky you didn't get killed, it's the death penalty, okay?
Well, so that was the announcement from the president a little bit earlier on. I mean, Lara, first of all, I'm not sure we're going to take at face value the idea that everyone who hears this idea is going to agree with it. We can be pretty clear that's not the case. And there are Democrat states, there are Republican states where you do or do not have at least, the possibility of death sentence for capital crime. I guess the thing here, Lara, is it's not up to the president to decide this, certainly not in the case of Washington, D.C.
No, exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. Of course, Washington is a federal district. It's not a state, let alone a Republican-led state. So for that reason, this is likely to be a much more complicated proposal, we should say, for Trump than perhaps if he had championed it in another state. It is, however, in keeping with a long-running desire of the president to see the death penalty maintained in states that already have it, and in some cases to extend it. He has instructed his Attorney General to work on this particular area, and of course the death penalty was the executions were paused by Merrick Garland, the Biden Attorney General, in the last administration. So clearly this is a flashpoint that they want to explore, and it's in keeping with what Trump and those around him will think has been a relatively successful few weeks of trying to take greater control of DC, saying that crime has spiked. Of course, federal statistics question that, but saying that crime has spiked and that it requires very intensive measures, such as measures like these, to be able to bring it down again.
And look, and it's in keeping with the the agenda of the moment, which is to be saying, look, it happens to be always blue cities, that the crime's out of control, the murder is rampant. You couldn't step out of your door without being murdered, and he's the answer to that, which one imagines he clearly does. He's going to play well with a constituency in the United States which is worried about crime, and maybe helps in that direction by him flamming up some of the crime figures, exaggerating the crime figures in cities like Washington, D.C., in cities like Chicago, where, from my superficial looking at the numbers, crime has actually been falling. But it's not just about that, is it? It's about exerting his grip, the power of the presidency beyond boundaries that have historically been there, Lara.
Yeah, so there has been a big debate about crime statistics here in DC and indeed across the country because, like you say, there is a lot of contention about whether or not crime is falling. So DC statistics from the police department here show that it reached a 30-year low after a peak in 2023. The Justice Department is now investigating the DC police statistics, seeing if they've manipulated those, because Trump believes that crime actually hadn't been falling that much. And as you say, there is this big question of what happens now in Chicago, seeing as Trump has set his sights on some sort of takeover or extension of federal law enforcement in the cities, where J.B. Pritzker, the Democrat governor of the state, has said, we have crime like other cities do, but let's be clear, we're actually in better shape than the 30 biggest cities across the United States. He's basically said saying there is no logical basis for this intervention other than perhaps to say it's a political opportunity from the president. But as you've also indicated, this is politically not particularly simple for the Democrats, many of whom are nervous about the Republicans appearing strong on questions of crime. And they have said privately, there are instances where you can look at the statistics and say that crime has gone down, but many people don't feel that. They don't feel safer. Often they feel unsafe in their homes and when they're walking on the streets, particularly at night. And for that reason, if you are seen as the Democrats to be soft on questions of crime, that is politically a vulnerable place for you to be. And so it's not an easy issue for the Democrats in this instance. And that's one of the reasons I think why when Trump is given these opportunities for long reflections, as he was at the opening of that cabinet meeting today in DC, you find him more often than not now returning to this topic.
Lara, I mean, the law and order, mission is how this militarization is being presented. But the political dimension, Laura, isn't that seems to be supported by the news that some of these National Guardsmen, whose job is not to enforce the law, they have been given training in riot control, in crowd control, which is a more political angle to it, isn't it?
Yes, and I mean exactly what these National Guard officers were going to be doing when they were deployed to DC has always been quite an unanswered question because, of course, it wasn't clear for some time whether or not they would be carrying weapons. Of course, we now know that they are able to carry weapons, but it seemed, especially in the earlier days of this federal takeover, that they were being concentrated in perhaps safer and at least tourism-friendly areas. So, when I walked to Congress last week, you go through Union Station, which is, of course, where J.D. Vance was on the same day with Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, talking up this takeover. Traditionally, not considered one of the kind of hotspots of crime, perhaps, in DC. But on that day, there were, tons of police cars. There were National Guard officers around, and it was seen as one of the most kind of concentrated areas of a more visible uptick in law enforcement. And so now the big question is what their actual role will be in the coming weeks and months elsewhere. It's true that you have seen more police able to do other things, perhaps in DC in recent days, and certainly even though there haven't been riots here or any kind of visible unrest, at least to the naked eye, it certainly feels like people are perhaps, especially in restaurants, less likely to be going to eat out, for example, and some workers as well staying home.
And is it the case, Lara, that all of these cities being discussed by the White House as possible targets of militarization, these are all blue cities with blue states? I mean, we have red states, Republican states, where cities have higher levels of crime than some of the cities that are being mentioned now by the president. Is that generally true?
Well, that's one of the big questions is when President Trump has cited the cities that he has in his sights for greater law enforcement in recent days. That's been places like Baltimore, which he mentioned on Sunday, could be a focus of his efforts, as well as, of course, Chicago and notably New York City as well. And of course, the Democratic mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani is a constant bête noire of leading Republicans, particularly in the Trump administration, who will be very happy at the opportunity to be able to highlight him as representative of the Democratic establishment. And for that reason, they're happy to have this showdown. And like you say, particularly when it comes to Democrat mayors and governors, they like the idea of having a battle with them. And like you say, it seems very blue on red at the moment. Yeah. Right.
And Lara, I know you have to leave us, so really grateful for you taking the time to talk to us on the show this evening. But before you do, another gem out of the president's mouth today. He was having a go at Britain, wasn't he, about windmills, one of his favourite hates. Just tell us more.
Yes. So again, of these kind of long musings that you hear from him, sometimes he will pick a particular topic, but he has reignited his very long-standing criticism of wind farms. He said that they have caused energy costs in Britain to go through the roof. He's predicted a bad awakening very soon. He said that windmills are ruining our country. They're ruining everyone. He said, I hate to mention countries, but you look at the UK, what's happened there. Their energy costs have gone through the roof there. Of course, we know Trump has a long storied history with wind farms in the UK. Of course, on that visit to Scotland in July, he described those 11 turbines that are alongside his golf course in Aberdeenshire as some of the ugliest you've ever seen. He'd actually appealed in 2012 before the Scottish Parliament to give evidence on what he believed was the damaging impact of those. And it is one of the great constants of his political career that he absolutely despises the energy form. Of course, we are only 3 weeks away or so from his state visit to the UK. So an interesting time to be talking about them. And I'm sure, no doubt, we'll hear much more from him on that question very soon.
And we are all looking forward to that state visit. Great to have you with us, Lara. Talk to you again soon.